The words hit like a slap across my face. You're just like your mother. Dad's voice dripped with contempt as he stabbed his fork into the pot roast I'd spent hours preparing. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the gentle clink of silverware against plates. My name is Julia, and I've spent 29 years trying to prove I'm nothing like the woman who walked out on us when I was 12. But tonight, as I stared at my brother Chris across our weekly family dinner table, I realized maybe being like her wasn't such a bad thing after all. Jules, come on, Chris pleaded, his boyish charm cranked up to 11. It's just a temporary setback. I'll pay you back this time, I swear. I set down my wine glass harder than intended. Like you paid me back the last 3 times? Or the time before that? That's different. $40,000, Chris. That's how much I've given you over the past 2 years. Money I saved for a down payment on a house. Dad cleared his throat. Julia, your brother is going through a rough patch. Family helps family. Does family enable family to gamble away their life savings? The words escaped before I could stop them. Chris's face reddened. I told you, it's not gambling. I'm investing. In what? Underground poker games? Sports betting? Or is it those sketchy crypto schemes this time? That's enough. Dad's fist came down on the table, making the dishes jump. Your brother has a plan. He just needs a little help getting back on his feet. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He's had plans for the last 15 years, Dad. Remember when he dropped out of college to become a day trader? Or when he convinced you to remortgage the house for his sure thing investment? At least he's trying, Dad shot back. What have you done except work that dead-end job at the publishing house? That dead-end job pays my bills, and apparently everyone else's too. Chris leaned forward, eyes glistening. Jules, please, I'm in trouble. These guys, they're not the kind you want to owe money to. My stomach clenched. I'd heard this before, the threats, the dangerous people, the urgent need for cash. Every time, I'd given in, telling myself it was the last time, that Chris would finally learn his lesson. No, I said quietly. What? I said no, Chris. I'm done. Dad pushed his chair back with a screech. Well, I guess we know who you really are now. Your mother would be proud, always thinking of yourself first. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse. You know what, Dad? Maybe she was right to leave. Maybe she saw something I'm only just beginning to see. Julia Mason, don't you dare. What? Tell the truth. That's always been the problem in this family, hasn't it? We pretend everything's fine while Chris destroys himself, and you enable him every step of the way. Chris's voice cracked. Jules, please don't go. I need you. I paused at the doorway, fighting back tears. No, what you need is help. Real help. And as long as Dad keeps covering for you, you'll never get it. If you walk out that door, Dad called after me, don't bother coming back. I turned to face them one last time. Chris slumped in his chair, looking smaller than his 31 years. Dad, standing rigid with anger, his face a mirror of disappointment I'd seen 1,000 times before. You know what's funny, I said. Mum left a note when she went. I found it years later, hidden in her jewelry box. Want to know what it said? Sometimes loving someone means walking away. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but it might as well have been a thunderclap. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with messages. Probably Chris, maybe Dad, possibly both. I ignored them. Instead, I pulled up my best friend Zoe's number. Hey, I said when she answered. Remember that crazy idea we talked about? The one about exposing everything? You mean the nuclear option? She sounded concerned. Are you sure? I watched the lights go out in my childhood home's windows, one by one. Yeah, I think it's time. Can you come over? Give me 20 minutes and a bottle of wine. As I drove away, Mom's words echoed in my head. Sometimes loving someone means walking away. But sometimes, I thought, it also means fighting back. And I was done walking away. Holy shit, Zoe whispered, scrolling through my laptop. You've documented everything. I nodded, pouring us each another glass of wine. My living room floor was covered with papers, bank statements, loan documents, screenshots of threatening texts from Chris's bookies, and photos of him entering known gambling establishments. I started keeping records after the second time he asked for money, I explained. Something told me I'd need proof someday. Zoe picked up a bank statement. $10,000 to some guy named Victor, in cash. That was last March. Chris said it was for a business investment. I followed him that day. He went straight to an underground poker game in the warehouse district. And your dad really has no idea? I laughed bitterly. Oh, he knows. He just pretends not to. Look at this. I pulled up an email chain. Dad's been taking money from his retirement fund to cover Chris's debts. He's burned through almost half of it. My phone buzzed again. The 15th text from Chris since dinner. I glanced at it. Please, Jules, they're giving me 48 hours. I'm scared. Zoe caught me looking. Don't you dare answer him. I wasn't going to. I tossed the phone aside. But I keep thinking about what happens when they really come for him. What if... Stop. Zoe grabbed my hands. That's exactly how they keep pulling you back in. Fear, guilt, family obligation. When does it end? She was right. I'd been playing this game for years, watching Chris spiral deeper while Dad enabled him. Every time I tried to help, it only made things worse. So what's the plan? Zoe asked, reaching for her laptop. We've got enough evidence here to write a book. I pulled up a web page showing Pearl Gibson's latest exposé. She's perfect. She specializes in stories about family corruption and addiction. Remember that piece she did last year about the judge who kept covering up his son's DUIs? You're really going to do this? Go public? Not me directly. I started creating a new email account. Everything will be anonymous, but people need to know. Not just about Chris, but about how families like ours enable addiction, how we pretend everything's fine while someone we love destroys themselves. My phone rang. Dad this time. I declined the call. What about your job? Zoe asked. If this gets traced back to you, I've thought about that. I pulled out a resignation letter I'd drafted. I've got savings, not as much as I should, thanks to Chris, but enough. And I've been freelancing on the side. I'll manage. We spent the next hour organizing the evidence, scanning documents, and crafting an email to Pearl. My hands shook as I attached the files. Wait, Zoe said just before I hit send. Are you absolutely sure? This isn't just exposing Chris, it's your whole family. Once it's out there, you know what I found yesterday? I opened my drawer and pulled out an old newspaper clipping. Mom's obituary from 3 years ago. She died alone in a small apartment in Oregon. Never remarried, never had other kids. Just disappeared. Julia. She tried to tell Dad about Chris's gambling when it first started in high school, begged him to get Chris help. Dad accused her of trying to ruin our family's reputation. Sound familiar? Zoe squeezed my hand. You're not her, Jules. You're not running away. No, I agreed, clicking send on the email. I'm standing my ground. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the sent confirmation appear. My phone buzzed again. A text from Chris. Found someone else to loan me the money. Don't worry about it anymore. You've made your choice. Shit, Zoe muttered, reading over my shoulder. That doesn't sound good. I felt a chill. Chris's someone else usually meant people who charged astronomical interest rates and didn't take no for an answer. But for the first time, I didn't immediately reach for my phone to rescue him. How long do you think before Pearl responds? Zoe asked. Could be days, could be never. I closed my laptop. But at least I've done something. No more enabling, no more pretending. Zoe hugged me tight. Want me to stay over? I shook my head. I need to be alone tonight, process everything. After she left, I sat in my darkened apartment, staring at the city lights outside. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Dad, 5 from Chris, and dozens of unread messages. I turned it off. On my coffee table, Mom's obituary caught my eye. The photo showed her young, before everything fell apart, smiling at the camera with hope in her eyes. I picked it up, running my finger over her face. I get it now, Mom, I whispered. I finally get it. The weight of what I'd just done settled over me. There was no going back now. The truth was out there, making its way to Pearl Gibson's inbox, waiting to explode like a time bomb in the heart of our carefully constructed lies. 3 days after sending the email, I was making coffee when my phone lit up with an unknown number. My heart stopped when I answered. "Is this Julia?" The voice was professional, direct. "This is Pearl Gibson. I received your materials." I gripped the counter. "Yes, I wasn't sure you'd call." "I almost didn't. Anonymous tips are usually dead ends. But your documentation is thorough. Would you be willing to meet?" 2 hours later, I sat across from Pearl in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catch everything. "So," she said, spreading out printouts of my evidence, "why now?" "Because nothing else has worked. Because—" My voice caught as a couple walked past our table. "Because I'm watching my brother kill himself slowly while my father writes checks to cover the grave." Pearl nodded, taking notes. "And you're willing to go on record?" "No," I said firmly. "The story needs to be anonymous. My family, they can't know it came from me. That makes it harder to verify. We'd need—" My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Family meeting. Tonight. 7 p.m. Non-negotiable." "Everything okay?" Pearl asked, noting my expression. "Family dinner. They do this when they want to guilt me into something." I showed her the text. "Want to see their values in action?" Pearl's eyebrows rose. "You'd let me observe?" "From a distance. The restaurant they always choose has a bar with a clear view of the dining room." That evening, I walked into Salvatore's, our family's go-to restaurant for important discussions. Dad and Chris were already seated at our usual table. I could feel Pearl watching from the bar, nursing a glass of wine. "Julia," Dad stood, trying to hug me. I stepped back. "Sit down, please. We need to talk." Chris looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking slightly as he sipped his water. "Jules, I'm sorry about the other night." "Are you?" I sat down, keeping my voice level. "Or are you sorry I stopped enabling you?" "That's exactly the attitude we need to discuss," Dad interjected. "This family needs to stand together. Your brother—" "Found someone else to loan him money," I finished. "How much this time, Chris?" Chris stared at his plate. 50,000. Jesus Christ. I felt the blood drain from my face. "From who?" "That's not important," Dad cut in. "What's important is helping your brother out of this situation. I've already put in 30,000 from my retirement fund. If you could just—" "No." I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Do you even hear yourselves? This isn't help. It's suicide by installments." "Keep your voice down," Dad hissed. "What will people think?" "They'll think exactly what's true, that this family is destroying itself to protect a lie." The memory hit me suddenly. Mom standing in our kitchen 12 years ago, screaming these same words at Dad, while 17-year-old Chris sat crying at the table, confessing to stealing from her jewelry box to pay gambling debts. "Your mother never understood family loyalty," Dad said quietly. "I had hoped you would be different." "Loyalty?" I laughed, loud enough that nearby diners turned to look. "Is that what we're calling this slow-motion tragedy? Tell me, Dad, what happens when your retirement fund runs dry? When Chris borrows from the wrong people? When—" "That's enough." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You're either with this family or against it. Choose now." I looked at Chris, seeing the scared teenager he used to be overlaid with the desperate man he'd become. "I choose truth," I said softly. "I choose actually helping, not enabling. I choose—" "You choose to abandon your family," Dad finished. "Just like her." I grabbed my purse, hands shaking. "Mom didn't abandon us, Dad. She tried to save us. I see that now." As I walked out, I caught Pearl's eye at the bar. She gave me a slight nod. My evidence was no longer just papers and screenshots. She'd witnessed our dysfunction firsthand. Outside, the night air hit my face like a slap. My phone buzzed with a text from Pearl. "I'm running the story. This needs to be told." Another text followed immediately from Chris. I know it was you who contacted the journalist. I saw you look at her. You're dead to me. I leaned against the cold brick wall, letting the tears finally come. A memory surfaced. Mom's last words to me before she left. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it breaks your heart. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Dad and Chris, but I didn't read them. Instead, I pulled up Zoe's number. "It's happening," I said when she answered. "The story's going to run." "Are you okay?" I watched through the restaurant window as Dad comforted a crying Chris, both of them ignoring my empty chair. "No," I answered honestly, "but I think, maybe, someday I will be." The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Family values and fatal flaws, the hidden cost of enabling addiction, blazed across the front page of the city's largest newspaper. My hands trembled as I read Pearl's article, seeing our family's darkest secrets laid bare in stark black and white. My phone exploded. First came the text from Zoe. "Holy shit, it's everywhere. Are you okay?" Then the flood began. Relatives, family friends, people I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting to know if I'd seen it, if it was true, if I knew who could have exposed our family like this. I was hiding in my apartment when the pounding started. "Open the damn door, Julia!" Chris's voice boomed through the hallway. "I know you're in there!" I peered through the peephole. Chris looked wild, disheveled, nothing like the polished golden child he usually pretended to be. "Go away, Chris. It was you, wasn't it?" He slammed his fist against the door again. "That journalist, I saw you looking at her that night at Salvatore's. You did this." My neighbor's door creaked open. Mrs. Chen poked her head out, phone in hand. "Everything okay, Julia? Should I call someone?" "It's fine," I called back, even as Chris continued ranting. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "Dad's partners are pulling out of the firm. My investors are demanding their money back. Everyone knows." "That's the point," I said through the door. "No more secrets, no more lies. These people will kill me, Julia. Is that what you want? Your own brother dead?" Mrs. Chen was definitely dialing now. I heard her speaking quietly into her phone. "The only person killing you is yourself," I said, "and Dad's been helping you do it for years. You fucking bitch." Something crashed against my door, probably his fist again. "You're just like Mom, a selfish, traitorous—" "Is there a problem here?" A deep voice cut through Chris's tirade. Building security, finally. "This is a family matter," Chris snapped. "Sir, we've had complaints. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Tell my sister she's dead to me," Chris spat. "Tell her—" "Sir, now!" I waited until I heard the elevator doors close, before sliding down against my door, heart pounding. My phone buzzed again. Dad this time. "How could you?" His voice was ice cold when I answered. "Your own family. Someone had to do something." "Do something? You've destroyed us. The firm's reputation is in tatters. Your Aunt Sarah's charity foundation is returning Chris's donations. Money he borrowed from me, by the way. Everyone knows our business." "Good," I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. Maybe now Chris will get real help instead of blank checks. Help? He's talking about running away, disappearing before his creditors come for him. Is that what you wanted? The words hit me like a punch. He's what? Congratulations, Julia. You didn't just expose our family. You might have signed your brother's death warrant. The line went dead. I immediately called Zoe. "I'm coming over," she said before I could speak. "Don't move." While I waited, I scrolled through social media. The story was everywhere. People were sharing it, commenting, tagging our family members. Some defended us, calling it a private matter. Others praised the exposure of toxic family dynamics and enabling behavior. A message popped up from an unknown number. "Thank you for telling this story. My brother is just like Chris. Maybe now my parents will finally see what they're doing." Then another. "My family enabled my gambling for years, lost everything. This article might save lives." More messages flooded in. Stories of addiction, enabling, families torn apart by secrets. Each one felt like validation, even as my heart ached for Chris. Zoe arrived with wine and takeout. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up a local news website. There was Chris, caught on someone's phone camera, being escorted out of a casino. The timestamp showed it was from just an hour ago. "He's still gambling." My voice cracked. "Even now." "That's not the worst part." Zoe scrolled down. "Look who he was with." The grainy image showed Dad, following Chris into the casino, checkbook in hand. I stared at the photo, feeling something break and rebuild inside me. "They're never going to change, are they?" "Not unless they're forced to," Zoe said gently. "You did the right thing, Jules." My phone buzzed again. Pearl Gibson. "The follow-up stories are pouring in," she said when I answered. "Other families are coming forward. You've started something important here." I looked at the photo of Chris and Dad again, then at the messages from strangers sharing their own stories of family addiction. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" Pearl's voice was kind but firm. "Now we wait for the truth to do its work. It won't be pretty, but it's necessary." After I hung up, I opened my laptop and began to write. Not for Pearl this time, but for myself, for Mom, for everyone trapped in the cycle of enabling and denial. The truth was out. The real question was, what would rise from its ashes? A week after the story broke, I was cleaning out my childhood bedroom at Dad's house. He wasn't home, and I had a spare key. That's when I found Mom's diary, tucked behind a loose baseboard I'd accidentally kicked while moving boxes. My phone rang, just as I opened the worn leather cover. "Jules." Chris's voice was different, hollow, desperate. "I need to see you." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." He paused. "I'm outside Dad's house. I saw your car." My heart stopped. "How did you—" "Just come outside. Please." I clutched Mom's diary to my chest and walked downstairs. Chris stood on the front lawn, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven. "You shouldn't be here," I said, keeping my distance. "They're coming for me, Jules." His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "Victor's guys. They gave me until midnight to pay everything back, with interest." "How much?" $120,000. I felt sick. "Jesus, Chris." "Yeah," he laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "Dad's tapped out. His partners forced him into early retirement after your little exposé. The firm's distancing itself from the scandal." "Our scandal," I corrected. "And maybe that's exactly what needed to happen." He took a step toward me. I backed away. "You know what's funny?" His voice turned ugly. "I found Mum's old letters last night. She used to write to me after she left. Did you know that?" I gripped the diary tighter. "No." She begged me to get help, said she'd pay for rehab therapy, whatever I needed. He flicked his cigarette away. I threw them all away, told Dad she was trying to turn me against him. "Chris, you want to know why she really left?" He was closer now, eyes wild. "Because I stole her wedding ring to pay a debt. Told Dad she must have lost it. He believed me. He always believed me. And she just broke." The diary felt heavy in my hands. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you won." He threw his arms wide. "Congratulations, sister dear. You exposed all our dirty little secrets. Made Mom proud. But guess what? I'm still gambling. Dad's still covering for me. Nothing's changed except now everyone knows what a fucked up family we are." "Things have changed," I said quietly. "You're here, telling the truth for once." "The truth?" He laughed again, that horrible broken sound. "The truth is, I need that 120,000 by midnight or I'm dead. That's why I'm here. One last chance to beg my righteous sister for help." I opened the diary, pulled out a business card tucked between its pages. "Here." "What's this?" "Gambling addiction counselor. Mum's old therapist. She's still practicing." Chris stared at the card, then crumpled it. "I don't need a shrink. I need money." "No, what you need is to hit rock bottom. And maybe this is it." "Rock bottom?" He grabbed my arm. "You don't understand. These people will kill me." "Let go of me." Not until you help me. One last time. Please, Jules. I wrenched away from him. You want to know what Mom wrote in this diary? About the night she left? I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Sometimes love means watching them fall. Fuck you, he spat. Fuck you and fuck Mom and fuck your self-righteous. Everything okay here? A police car had pulled up to the curb. My neighbor across the street must have called them. Chris backed away, hands up. Just a family discussion. Ma'am? The officer looked at me. My brother was just leaving, I said firmly. Chris's face crumpled. Jules, please, I'm begging you. Go to the counselor, Chris. Or don't, but I'm done enabling you. The police waited until Chris got in his car and drove away. I sat on the front steps, opening Mom's diary with trembling hands. My phone buzzed. Zoe, you okay? Your neighbor called me about Chris showing up. I found Mom's diary, I texted back. Can you come over? On my way, I began to read, Mom's familiar handwriting bringing tears to my eyes. My dearest Julia, if you're reading this, you've finally found the truth I couldn't tell you. The hardest part of leaving wasn't walking away from the lies. It was walking away from you. But sometimes the only way to save someone is to show them how to save themselves. I looked up at the house where we'd all lived our carefully constructed lies, where Mom had finally broken free, where Chris had just begged for one last chance to keep destroying himself. The diary held more secrets, I knew, more truth, more pain. But for the first time, I was ready to read it all. You need to see this. Zoe thrust her phone at me as soon as she walked in. The local news website was open to a fresh headline. Local attorney Jordan steps down amid family scandal. New allegations surface. I skimmed the article, my stomach dropping. Financial misconduct. Dad was stealing from his clients. Keep reading. The words blurred together. Multiple instances of misappropriated funds, covering gambling debts, client trust accounts. He was using client money to pay Chris's debts, I whispered. My phone rang. Dad. Don't answer it, Zoe warned. I put it on speaker instead. Hello? I'm outside your apartment. Dad's voice was eerily calm. We need to talk. I'm not there. I'm at your house, actually, reading Mom's diary. A long pause. Stay there. I'm coming. Dad. The line went dead. Zoe grabbed the diary. We should go, now. No. I took the diary back. I need to know everything. And so does he. 20 minutes later, Dad's car pulled into the driveway. He looked older somehow, defeated. The proud man who'd ruled our family with ironclad rules about appearance and reputation was gone. The firm knows everything, he said without preamble, walking into the living room. They're launching an investigation. How much did you take? He sank into his armchair. 200,000, maybe more. I lost track. Jesus, Dad. I was going to pay it back, he said quietly, once Chris got back on his feet. Stop. I opened the diary. Listen to this. Jordan knows about the missing client funds. He caught me looking at the accounts, said if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I never saw the kids again. Dad's face went white. Where did you... She knew, Dad. She knew you were stealing back then, too. The same pattern, covering for gambling debts, trying to hide the shame of our family's addiction. Your mother didn't understand. She understood perfectly. I flipped to another page. The worst part isn't the stealing or the lying. It's watching my children learn that love means covering up someone's crimes. I can't let them believe this is normal. Enough! Dad stood up, reaching for the diary. I pulled it away. No, you don't get to hide the truth anymore. Mom left because you were teaching us that love means lying, that family means fraud, that loyalty means destroying ourselves to protect the guilty. I did everything for this family. You did everything to protect your reputation, I corrected, and now you've lost it anyway. His shoulders sagged. What do you want from me, Julia? I want you to read this. I handed him a printed email. It's from the gambling counselor, the one whose card was in Mom's diary. Chris checked himself into rehab this morning. Dad's hand shook as he read. Why? Because he finally hit bottom. Because there's no one left to save him from himself. I paused. Because sometimes love means letting go. They'll arrest me, he whispered. Once the investigation. Probably. I took back the email. But maybe that's what you need too. Your own rock bottom. My phone buzzed. A text from Chris's rehab center. Patient wishes to inform family he's safely checked in. No visitors for 30 days. He's really doing it, Dad asked, seeing my expression. He's trying. Finally. I stood up. The question is, what are you going to do? I could run, he said softly. Take what's left, start over somewhere. Like Mom did. He flinched. Except she ran to save herself, I continued. To save us, even though we didn't understand it then. You'd be running to save your pride. The scandal is already here, Dad. The truth is out, all of it. He buried his face in his hands. After a long moment, he looked up. There's a managing partner meeting tomorrow. They're expecting my resignation and a full confession. Good. I handed him Mom's diary. Read it. All of it. Maybe then you'll understand why she left. Why I had to expose everything. Why Chris finally hit bottom. And you? He looked old, vulnerable. Will you ever forgive me? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I do know this. Real love, real family. It's not about keeping secrets or enabling destruction. It's about truth, even when it hurts. Even when it costs us everything. Dad nodded slowly, clutching the diary. Your mother, she tried to tell me that, didn't she? Yes, I said softly. And now you have to decide. Are you finally ready to listen? He opened the diary with trembling hands and began to read. The rehab center looked more like a resort than a hospital. 30 days after Chris checked in, I sat in the family meeting room, waiting. My hands fidgeted with Mom's diary. I'd brought it on impulse, though I wasn't sure why. The door opened. Chris looked different, clearer somehow. The haunted look in his eyes had softened. Jules, he hesitated before sitting across from me. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you'd stay. Yeah, he smiled slightly. Me neither. Have you heard from Dad? The sentencing is next week. His lawyer thinks he'll get 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. Chris nodded, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. I wrote him a letter, part of the program, you know, making amends. Did he respond? Yeah, said he was proud of me finally. First time he's ever said that when I wasn't lying about something. A counselor poked her head in. Ready for the family session? We moved to a larger room where a woman with kind eyes and grey hair sat waiting. Her nameplate read, Dr. Sarah. Chris has made remarkable progress, she began, but recovery isn't just about the addict. It's about healing the whole family system. Our family system is pretty broken, I said. Tell her about the diary, Chris urged suddenly. I pulled it out. Our mom's. She left when we were kids. I found it recently. Dr. Sarah leaned forward. And what did you learn from it? That she was braver than we knew. I opened to a marked page. She wrote about seeing the patterns, how addiction spreads through families like a virus. Not just the gambling, but the enabling, the lies, the shame. Jules, Chris's voice cracked. Read the part about me, please. I found the entry he meant. My sweet boy thinks money equals love. Every time we bail him out, we're teaching him that his worth is measured in dollars and debts. I can't watch him learn this lesson anymore. She tried to save me, Chris whispered. Back then, but I chose Dad's way instead. The way of secrets and quick fixes. And now? Dr. Sarah asked. Now I'm choosing her way, the hard way, the truth. The counselor nodded approvingly. Julia, your article exposure. Chris tells me it was you who contacted the journalist. Yes. How do you feel about that decision now? I looked at Chris. Honestly? Some days I feel guilty. Dad's going to prison. Our family's reputation is destroyed. Chris could have... died? Chris finished. I was heading there anyway, Jules. The exposure just sped up the inevitable crash. "Tell me about your mother," Dr. Sarah said. "What would she think of all this?" I opened the diary to the last entry. "My biggest regret is not fighting harder for the truth, not standing firm when the lies threaten to drown us all. My children deserve better than a legacy of secrets." "She'd be proud of you," Chris said quietly. "You did what she couldn't. You broke the cycle." Dr. Sarah smiled. "Chris has something to share with you, Julia." Chris pulled out a folded paper. "I got a job, nothing fancy, maintenance work at a small hotel, but it's honest work, real work." That's amazing, Chris." "There's more." He took a deep breath. "I'm selling Dad's house." He agreed. "It'll cover most of my debts. The rest, well, I'll be paying it off for years, but at least it'll be honest debt repayment." Tears pricked my eyes. "Mum would be proud of you too. One day at a time," he said, echoing what must have been a rehab mantra. "Speaking of which," he pulled out another paper. "I found Mum's grave, in Oregon. I thought maybe, when I'm stronger, we could visit together," I finished. Dr. Sarah cleared her throat. "Chris, why don't you share your insight about the gambling?" "Right." He straightened up. "I finally figured it out. It was never about the money. It was about feeling worthy. Every win made me feel like the son Dad wanted. Every loss made me need that feeling more desperately. And now I'm learning to be worthy just by being honest, by doing the work, by facing the truth." The session wrapped up, and as we walked to the parking lot, Chris stopped me. "Jules, thank you for not giving up on me, for giving up on enabling me instead." I hugged him, our first real hug in years. "One day at a time, right?" "Right." He touched Mum's diary. "Keep it safe. Maybe someday we can read it together. Really understand her." "I'd like that." As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Pearl. "Following up on your story, dozens of families have reached out. Would you and Chris consider sharing your recovery journey?" I thought about Mom's last diary entry, about fighting for the truth, about breaking cycles. "Let me talk to Chris," I texted back, "but I think we're ready to tell the whole story now. The hard parts, the healing parts, all of it. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free, sometimes it brings you home." The autumn wind whipped around us as Chris and I stood before Mom's simple headstone. The Oregon cemetery was quiet except for rustling leaves and distant wind chimes. "Should we read it?" Chris held Mom's diary, his 6-month sobriety chip catching the sunlight as he moved. "You start." He opened to a random page. Today, Chris won his baseball game. His smile lit up the field. I wish I could freeze him in this moment, before the darkness of our family's legacy touches him. I placed the white roses we'd brought beside the stone. She knew, even then. "Julia." Chris's voice was hesitant. "Pearl's article about my recovery journey comes out tomorrow. Having second thoughts?" "No. Just, Dad wrote to me from prison, said going public with my addiction story would be the final nail in our family's reputation coffin." I laughed softly, still trying to control the narrative, even from behind bars. I wrote back, told him I'm done hiding. Chris touched the headstone. "Mom would understand." My phone buzzed, a text from Zoe. "Support group all set up for tonight, 15 families confirmed." After Pearl's follow-up article about Chris's recovery went viral, we'd started a support group for families dealing with gambling addiction. Tonight would be our first meeting. "Ready to head back?" I asked Chris. "Wait." He pulled out a letter. I wrote this. "To Mom. Part of the 12 steps, but it feels right to read it here." The paper shook in his hands as he began. "Dear Mom, I understand now why you left. I blamed you for years, but you were the only one brave enough to break free. I'm sorry I chose Dad's way of lies over your truth. I'm sorry I made Julia carry the burden of my addiction. But mostly, I'm sorry I wasted so many years being the son Dad wanted instead of the son you knew I could be." Tears streaked down his face. I squeezed his hand. "The thing is, Mom," he continued, Julia did what you couldn't. She forced us all to face the truth. Dad's in prison, facing his crimes. I'm sober, facing my demons. And tonight, we're starting a support group to help other families break free from the cycle of addiction and enabling. A gust of wind scattered leaves across Mum's grave. Your diary saved us, Chris finished. Your words gave Julia the strength to expose our secrets, gave me the courage to get help. We're not hiding anymore, Mum. We're healing. I hope you can see that. He folded the letter and tucked it under the roses. Jules, he turned to me, what you did, exposing everything, it was the most loving thing anyone's ever done for me, even if I hated you for it at first. Love isn't always gentle, I said, remembering Mum's words. Sometimes it's fierce. Sometimes it burns everything down so something new can grow. Speaking of new things, Chris pulled out a brochure. The counseling certification program accepted me. Once I hit my 1-year sobriety mark, I can start training to help other gambling addicts. Pride swelled in my chest. Mum would love that. Think we should head to the meeting, share her story with the group. I picked up the diary. I think that's exactly what she would want. As we walked back to the car, Chris stopped suddenly. You know what I realized? All those years, Dad taught us that family means protecting each other's secrets. But Mom knew the truth. What's that? Real family means protecting each other from secrets. At the community center that evening, I watched Chris share his story with a room full of people fighting their own battles with addiction and enabling. He spoke about Mum's courage, Dad's failures, my tough love, and his own journey to recovery. I opened Mum's diary one last time, reading her final entry silently. My dearest children, if you're reading this, you've finally found your way to the truth. Remember, our legacy isn't in the secrets we keep, but in the courage we find to break free from them. Love isn't measured in silence or sacrifice, but in the strength to speak up, to stand firm, to save each other from the comfortable lies that destroy us. I hope someday you'll understand why I left. More importantly, I hope you'll find the courage to stay and fight for something better. Looking around the room at all the families beginning their own journeys to truth and healing, I knew we'd finally found that courage. Mum's diary wasn't just a record of our past, it was a roadmap to our future, a future built on truth, no matter how difficult, on love, no matter how fierce. We were finally becoming the family she always knew we could be.